$32 billion. That's not a typo. $32 billion in personal net worth achieved by a 30-year-old math nerd who slept 4 hours a night on a beanbag chair and drove a Toyota Corolla. Sam Bankman-Fried became richer than Elon Musk was at 30, wealthier than Mark Zuckerberg at the same age, commanding more liquid capital than entire nations. Forbes put him at number 41 on their billionaire list. Time magazine called him the next Warren Buffett. Politicians from both parties lined up for his donations. But what nobody knows is that while Sam posed for magazine covers and testified before Congress, $8 billion of customer money was vanishing into a black hole. The secret behind his empire wasn't innovative technology or visionary leadership. The empire was built on lies, backdoor deals, and code written specifically to hide fraud. Within 10 days of the first warning signs going public, the entire $32 billion fortune evaporated completely. Not declined, not reduced, evaporated. This is the story of how one Jewish math prodigy from California built the fastest-growing crypto empire in history, convinced the world's smartest investors he was a genius, and then orchestrated one of the largest financial frauds ever recorded. The rise took 5 years, the fall took 10 days, and the truth behind what really happened inside FTX is more shocking than anyone imagined. Sam Bankman-Fried sits in a Brooklyn detention center today, wearing prison khakis instead of cargo shorts, facing 25 years behind bars after being convicted on 7 counts of fraud and conspiracy. The man who once shared stages with Bill Clinton and Tony Blair now shares a cell block with drug dealers and extortionists. His net worth went from $32 billion to zero faster than any billionaire in recorded history. $32 billion to zero in 10 days. Let me take you back to where this started, because Sam's origin story sounds exactly like every other Silicon Valley founder myth. Born March 6, 1992, in Stanford, California, to 2 MIT-educated law professors who taught at Stanford Law School. His parents, Barbara Fried and Joseph Bankman, weren't just any law professors. These were elite academics who specialized in tax law and policy, moving in circles where dinner conversations involved constitutional theory and utilitarian philosophy. The Bankman-Fried household in Palo Alto wasn't wealthy by Bay Area billionaire standards, but it was intellectually rich in ways most families can't comprehend. Sam showed mathematical aptitude early, the kind that makes teachers send notes home suggesting gifted programs. At 8 years old, he'd solve probability puzzles for entertainment. At Crystal Springs Upland School, an elite private prep school in Silicon Valley, he dominated math competitions while looking perpetually disheveled, his curly hair forming a chaotic halo around his head. Teachers remember him as brilliant but socially awkward, the kind of kid who'd correct adults mid-sentence about statistical errors. What most people don't know is that Sam's childhood wasn't just about mathematics. His parents deeply embedded him in utilitarian philosophy, specifically a branch called effective altruism that would later become his public brand. Effective altruism argues that you should maximize your wealth specifically to give it away to causes that do the most good per dollar spent. This wasn't casual dinner table philosophy. This was rigorous ethical training from parents who believed morality could be calculated like a math equation. Sam attended Massachusetts Institute of Technology, starting in 2010, majoring in physics and minoring in mathematics. At MIT, he joined the Epsilon Theta fraternity, but even there he stood out as unusual. Fraternity brothers remember him playing video games obsessively, particularly League of Legends, sometimes for 18-hour stretches. He'd show up to class looking like he'd slept in his clothes because he had. He drank only water and ate only vegan food, explaining his choices through utilitarian calculations about suffering reduction and personal optimization. Behind the awkward exterior was a mind that processed numbers differently than most people process language. Sam could hold complex probabilistic models in his head, running scenarios and calculating expected values faster than most people could use calculators. His MIT professors noticed. One recommended him for Jane Street Capital, an exclusive quantitative trading firm that recruited only the most elite mathematical minds from top universities. The gap between scruffy college kid and $32 billion empire builder seems impossible to cross. Sam had no business experience, no charisma, no management training, and by his own later admission, never read a book cover to cover after age 12. He looked like someone who'd struggled to manage a lemonade stand, let alone a multinational financial empire. Yet within 8 years of graduating MIT, he'd be standing in the Bahamas penthouse, commanding an exchange processing $5 billion in daily trading volume. The method that took him there wasn't complex AI algorithms or blockchain innovation. The method was much simpler and much darker. Sam discovered that in the largely unregulated crypto markets, you could do things that would send you to prison in traditional finance. Better yet, you could do them while building a public brand as the industry's most ethical operator. You could steal billions while positioning yourself as the responsible adult trying to bring regulation to crypto. But to understand how a Stanford-educated effective altruist became a convicted fraudster, we need to go back to 2017 when Sam first discovered the price difference between Bitcoin in Japan and Bitcoin in America. That discovery would change everything. Chapter 1: Prodigy Rising. The year 2017 marked Sam Bankman-Fried's entry into cryptocurrency, though he'd later claim he barely understood what Bitcoin was when he started trading it. Fresh from his 3-year stint at Jane Street Capital, where he'd learned quantitative trading strategies from some of Wall Street's sharpest minds, Sam was looking for his next move. Jane Street had taught him something crucial that most traders never fully grasp. Markets are just numbers, and numbers can be arbitraged. At Jane Street's Berkeley Street office in Boston, Sam worked among traders who thought in probabilities and executed strategies in microseconds. The firm specialized in market making and arbitrage, buying assets in one market and simultaneously selling them in another to capture price differences. These differences might be fractions of a percent, but when you're trading billions of dollars, fractions become millions. Sam absorbed this mindset completely, learning to see markets not as places where businesses raised capital, but as inefficient systems leaking money that smart people could capture. He left Jane Street in September 2017, citing a desire to pursue effective altruism more directly. His plan, at least publicly, was to earn massive amounts of money through trading, then donate it all to efficient charities that save lives per dollar spent. This was classic effective altruism doctrine: maximize earning potential, minimize personal consumption, give away the difference. Sam would later tell interviewers he planned to keep only 1% of his wealth and donate 99%. Around this time, Sam's younger brother Gabe introduced him to cryptocurrency markets. Gabe was deeply involved in effective altruism circles and had started exploring crypto as a potential earning avenue. What Sam discovered shocked him. Bitcoin was trading for around $11,000 on American exchanges like Coinbase and Gemini. On Japanese exchanges like Bitflyer, that same Bitcoin was trading for $13,000, not $13,001, $13,000, a roughly 20% price difference for the identical asset. You see, this shouldn't exist in efficient markets. When price differences emerge between markets for identical assets, arbitrage traders immediately buy low and sell high until the gap closes. The gap might last seconds or minutes before disappearing. But in crypto markets during 2017, the gap persisted for days, sometimes weeks. The reason was simple. Getting money into and out of Japanese crypto exchanges was bureaucratically nightmarish, involving Japanese bank accounts, residency requirements, and anti-money laundering checks that took months to clear. Sam saw opportunity. While other traders were getting rich buying Bitcoin and hoping it went up, Sam could get rich buying Bitcoin in America, selling it in Japan, and pocketing the difference regardless of Bitcoin's price direction. This was arbitrage, not speculation. Whether Bitcoin went to 20,000 or crashed to zero, he'd profit from the spread. The practical challenges were enormous. Sam needed Japanese bank accounts, which required Japanese business entities. He needed relationships with multiple exchanges across different countries. He needed millions of dollars in starting capital to make the trade sizes profitable. Most critically, he needed to move money across international borders quickly, navigating banking regulations designed to prevent exactly what he planned to do. What's interesting is that Sam wasn't operating alone. He recruited several MIT and Jane Street colleagues, including Gary Wang, a former Google engineer and MIT classmate who'd known Sam since college. Gary was a programming genius, the kind who could build complex trading systems from scratch. While Sam handled strategy and capital raising, Gary would build the technical infrastructure. Together, they formed Alameda Research in October 2017, naming it after Alameda County in California, where Sam had spent time during his youth. Alameda Research wasn't registered as a formal business entity initially. The name was deliberately generic, chosen specifically because it sounded respectable, but revealed nothing about what they actually did. Sam would later explain this choice cynically. Alameda Research sounded like a serious quantitative firm, not a crypto gambling operation run by 25-year-olds from a Berkeley apartment. The early months were chaotic. Sam, Gary, and a small team worked from a 3-bedroom house in Berkeley, setting up accounts on dozens of exchanges across multiple countries. They navigated wire transfer limits, anti-money laundering questions, and the perpetual problem of exchanges that would accept deposits but mysteriously delay withdrawals. Sam became expert at charm-calling exchange support teams, explaining he was a legitimate trader, not a money launderer, even though what he was doing occupied a regulatory gray zone. The trade itself was conceptually simple but operationally complex. Buy Bitcoin on Coinbase in America, transfer Bitcoin to Japanese exchange, sell Bitcoin for yen, convert yen to dollars, wire dollars back to America, repeat. Each step involved fees, delays, and exchange rate risks. But with spreads sometimes reaching 20 or 30%, even after fees, the trade printed money. By December 2017, Bitcoin had reached its then all-time high near $20,000, and the Japan arbitrage spread had widened to absurd levels. Sam and Gary were moving tens of millions of dollars through their system, generating returns that seemed impossible to anyone who understood traditional finance. Some days, they'd make $1 million. On exceptional days, they'd make 10 million. The Jane Street calculus Sam had learned was proving out. Find market inefficiency, exploit it systematically, scale it maximally. But Alameda Research wasn't just running Japan arbitrage. Sam was simultaneously trading spot crypto markets, derivatives, and exploring other international arbitrage opportunities between Korean exchanges, European exchanges, and American platforms. The firm was becoming a genuine market maker, providing liquidity across dozens of trading pairs. By early 2018, Alameda was trading hundreds of millions of dollars daily. The truth is that Alameda's early success came partly from skill and partly from unprecedented market conditions. The 2017 crypto boom created pricing inefficiencies everywhere because the infrastructure couldn't handle the flood of new traders. Exchanges crashed regularly. Wire transfers took weeks. Customer service was non-existent. In that chaos, someone with Jane Street training and MIT-level programming skill had an enormous edge. Sam was keeping incredibly detailed spreadsheets tracking every trade, every fee, every transfer. His risk management was sophisticated, hedging Bitcoin price exposure, so he only captured arbitrage spread, not directional risk. This was professional trading, not the reckless gambling that characterized most crypto participants. When Bitcoin crashed from 20,000 to 6,000 during 2018, most crypto traders were devastated. Alameda Research barely noticed because they weren't betting on direction. By mid-2018, Alameda Research was managing around $100 million in capital and generating tens of millions in annual profits. Sam was personally worth perhaps $20 million, a staggering sum for a 26-year-old 18 months into his crypto career. He still lived in that Berkeley group house, sleeping on a beanbag, eating vegan stir-fry, working 80-hour weeks. Here's what's interesting. Sam was already displaying the trait that would later define his empire and destruction. He was extraordinarily confident in his ability to calculate risk, sometimes taking positions that seemed reckless to outside observers. When other Alameda traders pushed back on risky strategies, Sam would override them, citing expected value calculations that existed only in his head. Gary Wang, who was more cautious, would occasionally object, but Gary was fundamentally deferential to Sam's vision. This wasn't arrogance in the traditional sense. Sam genuinely believed he was smarter at risk calculation than almost anyone alive. His MIT training, Jane Street experience, and track record of success reinforced this belief. When you're 26 years old and turning millions into tens of millions through mathematical arbitrage, it's easy to think you've discovered something others missed. But the Japan arbitrage opportunity was closing. As more traders discovered the spread, and as Japanese exchanges improved their banking relationships, the price differences narrowed from 20% to 10% to 5%. By late 2018, the trade barely covered transaction costs. Alameda needed a new strategy, a new edge in markets that were becoming more efficient. That's when Sam started contemplating something radical. Instead of trading on other people's exchanges, what if he built his own exchange? An exchange designed by traders, for traders, with the features he wished existed. More importantly, an exchange where Alameda Research could trade with built-in advantages that outside traders wouldn't see. The idea was forming, though Sam likely didn't realize where it would lead. He was about to build FTX, and that exchange would take him from millionaire to billionaire in less than 3 years. Chapter 2: Arbitrage Genius. The decision to build FTX emerged from frustration more than vision. Throughout 2018 and early 2019, Sam and the Alameda research team were trading across dozens of cryptocurrency exchanges, and every single one frustrated them. Platforms crashed during high volatility. Order books were thin, meaning large trades moved prices dramatically. Derivative products were limited or poorly designed. Worst of all, exchanges treated professional traders like Alameda the same as amateur gamblers, offering no special terms or features. Sam started documenting everything wrong with existing exchanges in characteristic detail. Binance had liquidity but limited derivatives. BitMEX offered sophisticated derivatives but routinely went offline during volatile periods. Coinbase was reliable but catered to retail customers, offering nothing for professional traders. Kraken had terrible UI. Bitfinex had persistent banking problems. The list went on. What most people miss is that Sam's frustration wasn't just about user experience. He was specifically annoyed that exchanges didn't offer the kinds of exotic derivatives and leveraged products he wanted to trade. Traditional exchanges were limited by regulations requiring customer protection. Crypto exchanges mostly avoided regulation by not serving US customers, but they still operated conservatively, afraid of enabling too much leverage or too much risk. Sam saw an opening. Build an exchange specifically for degenerate traders who wanted maximum leverage, complex derivatives, and innovative products nobody else offered. Ignore retail customers completely. Focus on the whales, the professional firms, the market makers who moved billions. Create products so unique that traders would have to use your platform. He recruited Gary Wang as Chief Technology Officer, the obvious choice given Gary's programming expertise and their history together. Gary would build the core exchange infrastructure, the matching engine that processed trades, the wallet system that held customer funds. For product design and derivatives expertise, Sam brought in Nishad Singh, another MIT connection who'd been working as a Facebook engineer. Nishad was brilliant with both code and financial mathematics, exactly what they needed. The team started building FTX in late 2018, working from Hong Kong initially, because Hong Kong offered better banking access than mainland China while maintaining minimal regulatory oversight. Sam had chosen Hong Kong deliberately after researching crypto-friendly jurisdictions. The name FTX stood for Futures Exchange, though they'd later expand far beyond futures. The branding was intentionally professional. Clean logos, corporate blues and blacks, nothing that screamed unregulated crypto casino. Here's the thing. Building a cryptocurrency exchange from scratch is staggeringly complex. You need order matching algorithms that handle thousands of orders per second. You need hot wallet systems that let customers withdraw funds while keeping the majority of assets in cold storage. You need margin calculation systems that automatically liquidate positions before customers lose more than their collateral. You need connections to dozens of blockchain networks, each with different technical specifications. Gary Wang built all of this in approximately 6 months, an almost superhuman engineering achievement. The FTX codebase was elegant, fast, and reliable in ways that surprised even experienced exchange operators. Gary's Google training showed the system was designed to scale from day one, handling the traffic of a major exchange even though FTX started with virtually no users. But technical excellence wasn't enough. Crypto exchanges are network effect businesses. Traders go where other traders are because that's where liquidity exists. An empty exchange with no trading volume is useless, regardless of how well it's built. FTX needed a launch strategy that would immediately generate trading volume. The breakthrough idea was something called leveraged tokens. These were products that didn't exist on any other exchange, specifically designed to capture retail trader attention. A leveraged token worked like this. Instead of manually trading with leverage, which required understanding margin and liquidation prices, a retail trader could simply buy bull tokens that automatically went up 3 times as much as Bitcoin, or bear tokens that automatically profited from Bitcoin declines. From a product design perspective, leveraged tokens were clever. They simplified complex leveraged trading into something as easy as buying regular cryptocurrency. From a business perspective, they were profit machines. Leveraged tokens carried high fees, and their rebalancing mechanisms meant traders would slowly lose money even if they correctly predicted market direction. FTX would make money whether the tokens went up or down. Sam launched FTX publicly on May 1, 2019, with almost no fanfare. The initial trading volume was minimal, maybe a few $1 million daily. But Sam had a secret weapon: Alameda research. He directed Alameda to trade heavily on FTX, providing the liquidity and volume that made the exchange appear active. Other traders seeing volume would join. Network effects would kick in. What nobody outside the organization knew was the specific relationship between FTX and Alameda Research. These were supposedly separate companies. FTX was an exchange. Alameda was a trading firm that used the exchange. But the separation was paper-thin. Sam controlled both. Gary Wang programmed both systems. The funding came from the same sources. More critically, as we'd learn much later, Sam was building special privileges for Alameda directly into FTX's code. Look, this is where the story gets darker, though it wouldn't become public for 3 more years. Gary Wang, at Sam's direction, programmed exceptions into FTX's code specifically for Alameda Research, while every other trading firm on FTX had automatic liquidation systems, meaning if their trades lost too much money, the exchange would automatically close the positions. Alameda had an exempted account. Alameda could have a negative balance. Alameda could borrow customer funds. Sam would later claim these exemptions were necessary for market-making purposes, arguing that Alameda needed special privileges to provide liquidity. That's partially true. Market makers on traditional exchanges do get special terms, but market makers don't get access to customer funds. Market makers don't get to trade with unlimited leverage using other people's money. What Sam programmed into FTX from the beginning was a backdoor that let Alameda Research treat customer deposits as Alameda's own trading capital. During FTX's first year, this arrangement didn't matter much because trading volumes were small. Alameda might borrow 10 or 20 million from the FTX customer wallet, use it for trading elsewhere, and pay it back within days. The borrowing was technical, not destructive. Customer withdrawals always processed because the amounts were manageable. But Sam's ambition was escalating rapidly. 20 million in daily volume wasn't enough. He wanted billions. He wanted to compete with Binance, the industry's dominant exchange processing tens of billions in daily trades. To get there, FTX needed differentiation beyond leveraged tokens. The innovation that changed everything was offering high-leverage futures contracts. Most exchanges capped leverage at 25 times, meaning you could control $25 worth of Bitcoin for every $1 of collateral. FTX started offering 50 times leverage, then 75 times, eventually reaching 101 times leverage on certain contracts. This was insane from a risk management perspective. Customers could lose their entire account balance from a 1% price movement, but it attracted exactly the kind of traders Sam wanted. Think about it. If you're a gambler chasing massive returns, where do you trade? The conservative exchange offering 10 times leverage, or FTX offering 100 times leverage? FTX was deliberately positioning itself as the platform for maximum risk, maximum reward. Sam was building the casino that let you bet your entire life savings on a single hand, which horrified traditional financial professionals but delighted crypto degens. By the end of 2019, FTX was processing around $200 million in daily trading volume, a genuinely impressive figure for an exchange less than a year old. Sam's personal net worth had grown to perhaps $50 million, split between his Alameda holdings and his FTX ownership. But 50 million wasn't the goal. The goal was billions, and Sam had a plan to get there that involved moving FTX from Hong Kong to somewhere even more permissive, the Bahamas. The truth behind FTX's rapid growth wasn't just clever products and aggressive leverage. Sam was spending money, Alameda's money, FTX's money, the distinction was blurry, on marketing at a scale that shocked competitors. FTX was sponsoring crypto conferences, paying influencers, buying ads across every crypto media platform. Competitors whispered that FTX's marketing budget exceeded their profit margins, wondering how a startup exchange could afford such spending. What they didn't know was that Sam wasn't operating under normal business constraints. Traditional companies need profitability, investor oversight, and financial discipline. Sam had structured FTX and Alameda as essentially his personal fiefdom, answerable to nobody except early investors who were being dazzled by growth numbers. Money flowed between Alameda and FTX freely, making profitability calculations impossible to verify. By early 2020, as COVID-19 started shutting down the world, crypto markets were surging. Bitcoin, which had spent 2019 consolidating around $8,000, started climbing. Trading volumes across all exchanges were exploding as people stuck at home discovered crypto trading. FTX's volume went from 200 million daily to 500 million, then to 1 billion. Sam's exchange had caught the wave at exactly the right moment, but the rapid growth was creating internal chaos. Alameda Research was borrowing increasingly large amounts from FTX to fund trading operations. The borrowing had gone from temporary and technical to structural and massive. By mid-2020, Alameda permanently owed FTX customer deposits somewhere between $1 and $3 billion, depending on how you calculated it. Gary Wang knew, Nishad Singh knew, Sam obviously knew. Nobody else did. The operation was becoming something darker than arbitrage genius. It was becoming a fraud machine, using customer deposits as venture capital for risky trading strategies. But the fraud was working, at least in the short term. Alameda's trading was profitable. FTX was growing faster than any exchange in history. Sam was appearing in Forbes articles as the boy genius revolutionizing crypto markets. Everything looked perfect from the outside, while the foundation was rotting from within. Chapter 3: Bahamas Empire. March 2021 marked FTX's physical transformation from a Hong Kong operation to a Bahamas empire. Sam chose the Bahamas deliberately after evaluating Singapore, Dubai, Switzerland, and various Caribbean jurisdictions. The Bahamas offered everything he needed: minimal financial regulation, proximity to United States markets, tropical paradise branding for recruiting, and a government desperate for foreign investment that asked few uncomfortable questions. The Bahamas government, led by Prime Minister Philip Davis, viewed FTX as a major economic opportunity. Cryptocurrency represented the future of finance, and landing the industry's fastest-growing exchange would position the Bahamas as a crypto hub rivaling Cayman Islands or Bermuda. Government officials rolled out the proverbial red carpet, offering Sam favorable terms through the Bahamas Digital Assets and Registered Exchanges Act. Sam didn't just move FTX's legal registration to the Bahamas. He moved himself and most of the core team to Nassau, specifically to a luxury development called Albany Marina. This wasn't Silicon Valley apartment culture. Albany Marina was where Tiger Woods kept vacation properties, where billionaires docked mega yachts, where penthouses sold for $30 million. Sam bought the most expensive penthouse in the development, a 9-bedroom complex that became both FTX headquarters and communal living space for the core team. The penthouse setup revealed Sam's management philosophy, or perhaps his lack of one. Roughly 10 people lived in the penthouse simultaneously. Sam, Gary Wang, Nishad Singh, Caroline Ellison, who'd become Alameda Research's co-CEO, and several other engineers and executives. They worked from the penthouse, slept there, partied there, and blurred every professional boundary imaginable. Employees described walking past bedrooms where executives were sleeping with each other while code was being pushed to production systems handling billions in customer funds. Caroline Ellison deserves particular focus because her role in the story becomes critical. Stanford math graduate, Jane Street alumna, daughter of 2 MIT economics professors, Caroline's background mirrored Sam's in eerie ways. She joined Alameda Research in 2018, quickly rising to trader and eventually co-CEO. Smart by any objective measure, Caroline nevertheless seemed perpetually overwhelmed by Alameda's operational complexity. Her blog posts and social media revealed someone conflicted about effective altruism, polyamory, and her complicated romantic relationship with Sam. Behind the scenes, Caroline was managing Alameda Research's increasingly desperate financial position. The trading firm that started as a sophisticated arbitrage operation had become a leveraged mess, borrowing billions from FTX to fund venture investments, real estate purchases, political donations, and risky trading strategies. Caroline knew this was wrong, but she was romantically involved with Sam, financially dependent on Alameda's salary, and trapped in a system where objecting meant being pushed out. What's interesting is how Sam used the Bahamas relocation to craft his public image. He gave interviews emphasizing FTX's commitment to regulation, positioning himself as the adult in the crypto room who wanted sensible rules. He testified before US Senate committees, wearing his signature casual attire, explaining that crypto needed better regulatory frameworks. Politicians ate it up. Here was a billionaire genius who actually wanted to be regulated. The calculated nature of this persona can't be overstated. Sam was simultaneously lobbying for regulations that would hurt competitor exchanges while building exemptions FTX could exploit. He donated millions to politicians from both parties, ensuring access regardless of election outcomes. His Washington, D.C. influence operation, led by former Republican and Democratic staffers, was as sophisticated as any Wall Street banks. By late 2021, FTX was processing $10 billion in daily trading volume, making it the third largest crypto exchange globally behind Binance and Coinbase. Sam's personal net worth, at least on paper, had reached $16 billion based on FTX's private valuation. Venture capital firms were desperate to invest, valuing FTX at $32 billion in a January 2022 funding round led by Sequoia Capital and SoftBank. Let me put this in perspective. FTX went from $0 to $32 billion valuation in less than 3 years. Facebook took 6 years to reach that valuation. Uber took 7 years. Sam had built the fastest growing financial company in history, or so it appeared. Sequoia Capital published an embarrassing puff piece titled The Ballad of Sam Bankman-Fried, describing how the partner who met Sam came away convinced he might be the world's first trillionaire. The Bahamas penthouse was becoming legendary within crypto circles. Employees described 70-hour work weeks, punctuated by parties featuring abundant drugs, particularly stimulants like Adderall and modafinil that crypto traders used to maintain focus. Sam was open about using stimulants, framing it through his utilitarian calculus. Stimulants increased productivity. Therefore, they maximized his ability to earn and donate money. The ethical math somehow justified the pharmaceutical consumption. Sam's personal behavior during this period was becoming increasingly erratic. He'd conduct important business meetings while playing League of Legends, barely making eye contact with venture capitalists, offering hundreds of millions of dollars. He'd show up to Bloomberg interviews looking like he'd slept in his clothes, hair uncombed, speaking in rambling tangents. Somehow this only enhanced his mystique, the eccentric genius too brilliant to care about appearances. But beneath the surface, the empire was structurally unsound. Alameda Research owed FTX approximately $8 billion by mid-2022, meaning $8 billion of customer deposits that should have been sitting safely in FTX's wallet were actually funding Alameda's activities. This wasn't a temporary loan, this was structural dependency that couldn't be repaid without liquidating Alameda's assets, most of which were illiquid venture investments and real estate. The venture investments deserve examination because they reveal Sam's mindset. Instead of keeping Alameda focused on trading, Sam was using the borrowed billions to make venture investments across dozens of startups. Some were crypto-related, like investing in Solana blockchain projects. Others were bizarre diversifications, hundreds of millions into artificial intelligence startups, genomics companies, even agricultural technology. Sam was playing venture capitalist with customer funds. Consider this. In April 2022, Sam spent $200 million purchasing a 7.6% stake in Robinhood Market stock. This wasn't an Alameda trading position. This was Sam personally, through a holding entity, buying a large stake in a public company. The money came from loans collateralized by FTX equity and Alameda assets, which themselves were inflated by FTX customer deposits. The circular financial engineering was dizzying. The real estate portfolio was equally absurd. Beyond the Albany penthouse, Sam and his lieutenants purchased at least 19 separate Bahamas properties worth more than $200 million combined. They bought beachfront compounds for employees, luxury condos for executives, and investment properties for reasons nobody could clearly articulate. When questioned later, Sam would claim the properties were necessary for recruiting, as if software engineers couldn't work without beachfront mansions. Meanwhile, FTX's marketing spending reached truly staggering levels. The company spent $135 million for naming rights to the Miami Heat's arena, rebranding it as FTX Arena in a 20-year deal. They paid millions to celebrity endorsers, including Tom Brady, Gisele Bündchen, Steph Curry, and Larry David. FTX ran Super Bowl commercials at $7 million per 30-second spot. For a company that claimed to value effective altruism, the spending seemed absurdly wasteful. Sam justified the marketing through his standard calculation. Spending $200 million on marketing to acquire customers who generate $500 million in revenue was positive expected value. The fact that the company was simultaneously stealing customer funds didn't factor into his utilitarian math. Or perhaps it did, and Sam had convinced himself the fraud was acceptable if the ultimate outcome was earning billions to donate to effective causes. The Bahamas government was thrilled with FTX's presence, viewing Sam as a golden goose generating tax revenue and international prestige. Prime Minister Davis appeared at FTX events, praising Sam's vision for the digital economy. The Bahamian Securities Commission, which ostensibly regulated FTX, conducted what can charitably be described as light-touch oversight. As long as the jobs and tax revenue flowed, nobody looked too carefully at the books. By early 2022, Sam was appearing on magazine covers, speaking at Davos, meeting with heads of state. He was particularly focused on pandemic preparedness, donating millions to organizations researching future pandemics and biosecurity threats. This aligned with effective altruism's emphasis on existential risk reduction, though critics would later note that Sam seemed more interested in appearing altruistic than actually maximizing charitable impact. The truth is that the Bahamas empire was built entirely on the fraud operating inside FTX. Every asset Sam owned, every investment Alameda made, every property they purchased traced back to customer funds that should have been segregated and safe. The empire wasn't the product of genius trading or visionary business building. It was the product of theft operating at massive scale, hidden behind sophisticated code and deliberate accounting confusion. But nobody outside the core group knew this. To the world, Sam Bankman-Fried was the boy genius who'd revolutionized crypto trading, the effective altruist who'd built a multi-billion-dollar company to fund charitable giving, the responsible industry leader who wanted sensible regulation. The gap between public perception and private reality had never been larger, and that gap was about to close in the most spectacular fashion. Chapter 4. $1 Billion. The year 2022 began with Sam Bankman-Fried at the absolute peak of his influence and perceived wealth. Forbes estimated his net worth at $24 billion in their March billionaire rankings, making him the richest person under 30 in the world. FTX's private valuation had reached $32 billion after the January funding round. Everything Sam touched seemed to generate wealth at an almost supernatural rate. What made Sam's position particularly remarkable was the diversification of his influence. He wasn't just running FTX and Alameda Research, he'd become a major political donor, contributing $40 million to candidates during the 2022 election cycle, making him the second largest Democratic donor behind George Soros. He was funding pandemic preparedness research through organizations like Guarding Against Pandemics. He was positioning himself to potentially purchase major social media platforms, having held discussions about acquiring shares of Twitter before Elon Musk's takeover. Their political donations deserve closer examination because they reveal Sam's strategic thinking. He gave primarily to Democrats publicly, funding candidates who supported crypto-friendly regulations. But documents later revealed he'd also donated to Republicans through dark money channels, admitting he gave equally to both parties, but kept Republican donations quiet because reporters freak out about Republican contributions in the effective altruism community. This was pure cynicism disguised as pragmatism. Sam's Washington influence operation centered on cryptocurrency regulation, specifically preventing regulations that would expose FTX's business model. Traditional securities exchanges operate under strict rules requiring customer fund segregation, meaning customer money must stay in separate accounts untouched by the exchange. FTX would collapse instantly under such regulations because Alameda had already spent the customer funds. Sam lobbied for crypto-friendly regulations with convenient loopholes. The sophistication of this regulatory arbitrage can't be overstated. Sam testified before Congress multiple times, positioning himself as the ethical exchange operator who wanted sensible rules to protect consumers. Lawmakers saw him as the good guy relative to anonymous DeFi protocols and sketchy offshore exchanges. What they didn't realize was that Sam was the sketchy offshore exchange, just with better branding and the effective altruism narrative. FTX's business metrics during early 2022 appeared extraordinary. The exchange processed over $10 billion in daily trading volume. Revenue was approaching $1 billion annually, mostly from trading fees and liquidations. The company employed hundreds of people across Bahamas, Hong Kong, and satellite offices worldwide. By traditional metrics, FTX was a successful financial technology company growing at unprecedented rates. But here's what's interesting. FTX's profitability was impossible to verify because the company never disclosed audited financial statements. Private investors like Sequoia Capital and SoftBank invested based on revenue projections and user metrics, not GAAP accounting. This is common in venture-backed startups, but unusual for financial exchanges handling billions in customer funds. Sam exploited this opacity deliberately, knowing that audited statements would reveal Alameda's borrowing. The relationship between FTX and Alameda Research had evolved into something genuinely unprecedented in financial history. Alameda wasn't just a customer of FTX with special privileges. Alameda was effectively FTX's venture capital arm, private equity fund, and proprietary trading desk simultaneously. Money flowed between the entities through constantly changing accounting categories: loans, investments, operating expenses, revenue shares. Tracking the flow required access to both companies' books, which only Sam, Gary Wang, and Nishad Singh possessed. Caroline Ellison, running Alameda Research day-to-day, was increasingly anxious about the firm's position. Alameda's balance sheet showed assets of around $14 billion, but roughly half those assets were in FTT token, FTX's native cryptocurrency that Alameda and FTX had essentially printed from thin air. The FTT token derived its value solely from FTX's success, meaning Alameda's assets were worth $14 billion only if you assumed FTX would remain solvent and successful. Let me break down the FTT token scheme, because it's crucial to understanding the empire's fragility. FTX created FTT as an exchange token, similar to Binance's BNB token. Customers who held FTT received trading fee discounts and other benefits. FTX sold some FTT to investors, but retained the majority for Alameda Research. On paper, Alameda held billions of dollars worth of FTT, calculated by multiplying FTT's market price by Alameda's holdings. The problem was that FTT's market price was based on thin trading volume. Daily FTT trading volume was typically under $200 million, meaning Alameda held a position worth billions that could only be sold for millions without crashing the price. If Alameda ever needed to convert its FTT holdings to cash, say to repay customer funds, the FTT price would collapse, making the assets worthless. The accounting was circular. FTX's value supported FTT's price. FTT's price supported Alameda's balance sheet. Alameda's balance sheet supported FTX's valuation. This circular structure is exactly what collapses during financial crises. As long as everyone believes in the system works. The moment doubt emerges, the entire structure falls simultaneously. Sam either didn't understand this systemic risk or chose to ignore it, believing he could maintain confidence indefinitely through public relations and misdirection. During spring 2022, crypto markets began declining as the Federal Reserve raised interest rates and risk assets sold off broadly. Bitcoin dropped from $47,000 in March to under $30,000 by May. This volatility stressed all crypto exchanges, but it particularly stressed FTX because Alameda's trading positions were losing money. Positions that had looked profitable at Bitcoin $40,000 were suddenly underwater at Bitcoin $30,000, requiring more collateral to maintain. The crypto industry was also experiencing the collapse of Terra Luna, an algorithmic stablecoin project that imploded in May 2022, wiping out $40 billion in value over 48 hours. Several crypto hedge funds and trading firms went bankrupt, including Three Arrows Capital, a prominent fund that collapsed owing billions to lenders. The contagion spread quickly as interconnected crypto firms discovered their counterparties were insolvent. Sam positioned FTX as the white knight during this crisis, offering bailouts to struggling crypto firms. FTX acquired BlockFi, a crypto lender, for essentially $0 plus assumption of liabilities. FTX provided credit lines to various failing firms. Sam gave interviews describing his responsibility to preserve the crypto ecosystem, comparing himself to J.P. Morgan during the 1907 financial crisis. The irony of using stolen customer funds to bail out other companies was apparently lost on him. What nobody understood at the time was that the bailouts were strategic, not altruistic. By acquiring BlockFi and other distressed firms, FTX gained their customer lists, technology, and assets at fire sale prices. Sam was consolidating the industry during a crisis, eliminating competitors while appearing heroic. The strategy would have been brilliant if FTX itself had been solvent. Since FTX was built on fraud, the acquisitions only expanded the eventual collapse. Throughout summer 2022, Sam maintained his public schedule of media appearances, political fundraising, and effective altruism advocacy. He published essays about pandemic preparedness, arguing that preventing future pandemics should be humanity's top priority. He pledged to donate $1 billion over the election cycle, positioning himself as the Democratic Party's second-largest donor after George Soros. His Twitter following grew to over 1 million followers. Behind the scenes, Alameda Research was facing a liquidity crisis. The combination of market declines, failed trading positions, and customer withdrawals from FTX meant Alameda needed to return funds to FTX's customer wallet. But Alameda's assets were mostly illiquid. Venture investments that took months to sell, real estate that required finding buyers, and billions in FTT tokens that couldn't be sold without collapsing the price. Caroline Ellison and Sam had several heated discussions about Alameda's position during this period, according to later testimony. Caroline warned that Alameda might not be able to repay the funds if customer withdrawals accelerated. Sam's response was essentially to ignore the risk, arguing that customer withdrawals wouldn't accelerate because confidence remained high. His entire strategy depended on maintaining appearances until markets recovered and Alameda could rebuild its balance sheet. This strategy might have worked if crypto markets had recovered quickly, but crypto markets continued declining through summer and fall 2022. By November, Bitcoin had fallen to $16,000, down 65% from January highs. The correlation was brutal. As crypto prices fell, FTX's customer deposits declined, requiring more liquidity. But Alameda's ability to provide liquidity was declining faster because its assets were denominated in depreciating crypto. The billion-dollar empire that looked invincible in January 2022 was actually teetering by November, held together purely by confidence and accounting gymnastics. Sam knew this, but he'd convinced himself he could maintain the illusion long enough for markets to recover. He'd successfully fooled venture capitalists, politicians, regulators, journalists, and millions of customers. What he didn't count on was a specific enemy who'd been watching carefully and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Chapter 5. Political Power. Sam Bankman-Fried's political ascent during 2021 and 2022 represented one of the most rapid accumulations of Washington influence in modern history. Within 2 years of FTX's founding, Sam had transformed from unknown trader to major political kingmaker, wielding influence that typically requires decades to develop. The speed wasn't accidental. Sam approached politics the same way he approached arbitrage, identifying inefficiencies and exploiting them systematically. The strategy began in early 2021 when Sam hired a team of political operatives from both parties. He brought on former Kamala Harris staffers, Obama administration alumni, and Republican congressional veterans. This wasn't typical Silicon Valley political engagement focused on single issues like net neutrality or antitrust. Sam was building a comprehensive influence operation designed to shape financial regulation, pandemic policy, and electoral outcomes simultaneously. Sam's brother, Gabe Bankman-Fried, ran Guarding Against Pandemics, an advocacy organization funded primarily by Sam's donations. GAP, as it was known, employed dozens of staffers lobbying for pandemic preparedness funding and regulations. The organization spent over $12 million during 2022 on lobbying and campaign contributions. While pandemic preparedness sounds altruistic, GAP's specific policy positions aligned suspiciously well with Sam's business interests, particularly around emergency spending bills that required less financial oversight. The cryptocurrency regulation aspect was most directly connected to FTX's survival. Sam funded congressional candidates who supported specific crypto legislation, particularly bills that would create federal frameworks preempting stricter state regulations. He cultivated relationships with key committee chairs, making FTX resources available for congressional briefings. When representatives needed to understand crypto policy, Sam positioned himself as the expert they could trust. What's fascinating is how Sam calibrated his public political identity. He presented as a liberal, effective altruist, donating to democratic campaigns and progressive causes. This positioning gave him credibility with the media and Democratic politicians. But simultaneously, through advisors and intermediaries, Sam donated equally to Republicans. He later admitted this explicitly. "All my Republican donations were dark, and the reason was not for regulatory reasons, it's because reporters freak the fuck out if you donate to a Republican." This cynical calculation reveals Sam's fundamental worldview. Politics wasn't about principles or ideology, it was about purchasing access and favorable regulations. The effective altruism framing provided moral justification. If he earned billions through morally neutral political manipulation, then donated those billions to effective causes, the net outcome was positive. The calculation ignored that the wealth came from fraud, not from political donations generating legitimate business value. By the 2022 election cycle, Sam had become impossible for congressional candidates to ignore. His donations often represented 5 or 10% of a candidate's total fundraising. He gave directly to campaigns, to party committees, to PACs supporting specific candidates. FTX and Alameda executives, following Sam's direction, donated millions more collectively. The financial influence bought access that's hard for ordinary citizens to comprehend. Congressional hearings on cryptocurrency regulation during 2021 and 2022 featured Sam as a star witness. He testified before the House Financial Services Committee, the Senate Agriculture Committee, and the House Agriculture Committee, presenting FTX as the responsible exchange that wanted smart regulation. Representatives thanked him for his leadership. Senators asked for his input on draft legislation. The access translated to influence over the specific regulatory framework being developed. Sam's specific regulatory goals were straightforward. create federal regulations for crypto exchanges that preempted stricter state regulations, but include carve-outs that existing exchanges like FTX could satisfy without audited proof of reserves. Traditional securities regulations required proof that customer funds existed in segregated accounts. Sam lobbied for crypto regulations that required disclosure but not independent verification, a distinction that sounds technical but determined whether FTX's fraud would be exposed. The political spending extended beyond cryptocurrency issues. Sam donated millions to candidates focused on pandemic preparedness, climate change, and effective altruism-aligned causes. He cultivated relationships with younger, progressive representatives who shared his stated values. These relationships provided political cover. When journalists investigated FTX, they found that respected political figures vouched for Sam's integrity. Consider how rare this was. A 30-year-old with no political background became the second-largest Democratic donor in less than 2 years. Established political donors like George Soros, Michael Bloomberg, and Tom Steyer spent decades building influence networks. Sam did it immediately through sheer financial force, spending tens of millions per year on political campaigns and advocacy. The effectiveness of this spending is debatable. Sam later claimed he'd secured regulatory advantages worth billions through his political donations. That's probably exaggerated. The crypto regulations Sam influenced had mixed effects on FTX's business. What the spending definitely achieved was normalizing FTX as a legitimate business deserving regulatory consideration, rather than the unregulated offshore exchange it actually was. Behind the political persona was something darker and more transactional. Documents later revealed that Sam viewed politicians with pure contempt, describing them in private messages as essentially creatures whose only goal is maximizing their re-election chances. He tracked which politicians provided return on investment for his donations, measuring their votes and public statements against FTX's regulatory interests. This was lobbying stripped of any pretense of shared values. Sam's parents, Barbara Fried and Joseph Bankman, were deeply involved in the political operation. Both Stanford law professors with extensive Democratic Party connections, they introduced Sam to potential candidates and provided strategic advice. Barbara Fried ran Mind the Gap, a political organization advising mega donors on effective giving strategies. The family collaboration meant Sam had sophisticated political counsel guiding his spending. The pandemic preparedness focus, channeled through Gabe's Guarding Against Pandemics organization, demonstrated how Sam monetized effective altruism. GAP lobbied for billions in government spending on pandemic prevention and biosecurity. These were genuinely important issues, but GAP's advocacy created opportunities for companies to receive government contracts. Whether Sam planned to position FTX-connected entities to capture this spending is unclear, but the potential was obvious. International political engagement was equally aggressive. Sam met with heads of state across the developing world, pitching FTX as infrastructure for national digital currencies. The Bahamas was the initial success story, but Sam was pursuing similar arrangements with governments in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. The vision was FTX becoming the global settlement layer for national digital currencies, a position that would generate enormous transaction fees and political power. The political operation required massive spending that drained resources from FTX and Alameda. Campaign donations alone exceeded $40 million in 2022. Lobbying expenditures added millions more. The GAP organization cost over $15 million annually. Staff salaries for the political team, often paying Washington insiders $500,000 or more, added up quickly. All this spending came from customer funds that should have been sitting safely in FTX's wallet. Think about the absurdity. Sam was using stolen customer money to purchase political influence to prevent regulations that would expose the stealing. The circular protection scheme was almost elegant. As long as the political donations maintained regulatory forbearance, the fraud could continue. The fraud generated funds for more political donations, which maintained regulatory forbearance, continuing the cycle. By mid-2022, Sam had reached the point where presidential campaigns were courting his support for 2024. He'd indicated willingness to spend up to $1 billion on political races, a figure that would make him the largest single donor in American history. Democratic strategists were calculating how to maximize Sam's contributions across presidential, Senate, and House races. His influence had become structural to the party's financial planning. What makes this particularly tragic is that Sam's effective altruism branding made him credible to people who should have been skeptical. Progressive politicians who claimed to care about wealth inequality and financial regulation accepted millions from someone who made his fortune through unregulated offshore trading. The effective altruism narrative that Sam was earning money specifically to give it away provided moral laundering for what was actually straightforward corruption. The political power Sam accumulated during this period represented peak influence for the crypto industry. No crypto executive before or since has achieved comparable Washington access. If Sam had been building a legitimate business, this political capital could have shaped regulations benefiting the entire industry. Instead, the access was used purely to prevent scrutiny of FTX's fraud, wasting an opportunity and poisoning political attitudes toward cryptocurrency. By late 2022, Sam was planning even more aggressive political spending for the 2024 cycle. He'd told associates he expected to be the largest donor in the presidential race. He was cultivating relationships with potential candidates, offering early financial support in exchange for favorable crypto policies. The political operation was scaling up, just as the business underneath was beginning to crumble. Sam apparently believed he could maintain the fraud indefinitely, as long as the political protection held. Chapter 6. Hidden Crimes. The fraud at the heart of Sam Bankman-Fried's empire wasn't a sudden decision or a desperate response to crisis. The fraud was architectural, coded into FTX's systems from the beginning and expanded systematically over 3 years. Understanding how the fraud operated requires understanding the technical infrastructure Gary Wang built at Sam's direction, the accounting fiction that concealed the theft, and the gradual corruption of everyone involved. Gary Wang's code was the mechanical foundation of the fraud. In the summer of 2019, as FTX was being built, Gary programmed special exemptions into the exchange's risk management system specifically for Alameda Research's account. Every other customer on FTX had automatic position limits and liquidation triggers. If your trading positions lost too much money relative to your collateral, the system would automatically close your positions before you could lose more than your account balance. This is standard exchange risk management, protecting both the customer and the exchange. Alameda Research's account had these protections disabled. Sam instructed Gary to create what was internally called the Allow Negative feature, letting Alameda's account balance go negative. This meant Alameda could withdraw more money than it had deposited, essentially borrowing from the pool of customer funds held by FTX. The code even exempted Alameda from margin calls that would force the firm to add collateral when positions moved against them. Initially, this exemption was small-scale, perhaps $10 or $20 million. Sam rationalized it as necessary for market-making activities. Alameda needed to move quickly, providing liquidity across multiple exchanges, and couldn't wait for wire transfers or collateral checks. This is partially legitimate. Market makers do need special arrangements, but market makers don't get unlimited access to customer funds. They get credit lines backed by posted collateral with clear borrowing limits and repayment terms. By late 2019, Alameda's negative balance had grown to around $100 million. The growth happened gradually enough that it seemed like temporary operational borrowing. Gary Wang expressed some concerns about the arrangement to Sam, but Sam dismissed them, pointing to Alameda's profitability and arguing the borrowing was covered by Alameda's assets. The argument was technically true but misleading. Alameda's assets included illiquid venture investments that couldn't quickly be converted to cash. The year 2020 brought COVID-19 and the associated crypto market boom. FTX customer deposits surged from a few $100 million to several $1 billion. Alameda's borrowing scaled proportionally, reaching approximately $2 billion by the end of 2020. This was no longer temporary operational borrowing. This was structural dependence, with Alameda using customer funds as permanent working capital for trading operations and investments. Caroline Ellison became Alameda Research's co-CEO in October 2021, alongside Sam Trabucco, another Jane Street alum. Caroline inherited an organization that was supposed to be a sophisticated quantitative trading firm, but was actually a poorly managed mess, borrowing billions from FTX. Trading positions were documented inconsistently. Risk management was minimal. The line between Alameda's assets and FTX's assets was blurred beyond recognition. What Caroline discovered was that Alameda's balance sheet was essentially fictional. The firm claimed around $14 billion in assets by mid-2022, but half of those assets were in FTT tokens that couldn't be sold without destroying their value. Another large portion was illiquid venture investments in early-stage startups that might take years to generate returns. Alameda's actual liquid assets, cash and assets that could be quickly converted to cash, were perhaps $2 or $3 billion, while the firm owed FTX over $8 billion. The accounting structure designed to conceal this reality was complex. FTX and Alameda used the same payment processing system through a North Dimension bank account. Customer deposits to FTX flowed into this account. Alameda's trading operations pulled money from this account. Tracking the flow required detailed reconciliation of which withdrawals were Alameda borrowing versus legitimate customer withdrawals. This reconciliation was performed manually by Nishad Singh and a small accounting team, creating opportunities for misclassification and concealment. Here's the thing. Standard accounting practice for exchanges requires complete separation of customer funds and operating capital. Customer deposits go into segregated accounts that the exchange can't touch except to process customer withdrawals. Operating expenses and business investments come from the exchange's own capital, raised from investors or generated through retained earnings. FTX ignored this segregation entirely, treating customer deposits as company funds available for any purpose. Sam created additional concealment through FTX's organizational structure. The main FTX exchange, ftx.com, was registered in Antigua. A separate entity, FTX US, served American customers and maintained better fund segregation to satisfy US regulators. The international FTX entity had minimal regulatory oversight, letting Sam operate without audited financial statements or independent custody verification. Customers depositing to ftx.com had essentially no regulatory protection. The venture investments made with customer funds were staggering in their scope and absurdity. Sam invested hundreds of millions in Anthropic, an AI safety startup founded by former OpenAI employees. He invested over $1 billion across various Solana blockchain projects. He bought stakes in Sequoia Capital's fund, in K5 Global's venture portfolio, in dozens of early-stage companies. These weren't Alameda trading positions. These were venture investments that would take 5 to 10 years to generate returns. Real estate purchases were equally outrageous. The 19 Bahamas properties worth over $200 million served no legitimate business purpose. Sam bought a $16.4 million penthouse for his parents in the Bahamas. He purchased multiple properties for Alameda and FTX executives. The money for these purchases came directly from customer deposits, making every property acquisition a specific act of theft. Political donations discussed in the previous chapter were also funded through customer money. When Sam donated $40 million to political campaigns in 2022, that wasn't his personal wealth, it was customer funds. The donations technically came from Sam and other executives personally, but those executives' wealth came from salaries, bonuses, and loans funded by the fraud. The entire chain of transactions traced back to customer deposits. Nishad Singh, FTX's director of engineering, was deeply involved in the technical implementation. Nishad built the internal systems that tracked fund flows between FTX and Alameda. He worked with Gary Wang on the software that enabled Alameda's special account privileges. By 2022, Nishad knew exactly what was happening and felt trapped. He later testified that he considered suicide after discovering the full scope of the fraud, but felt unable to report it or leave. The corporate culture made resistance nearly impossible. Sam controlled everything through his majority ownership. Gary Wang was technically brilliant, but deferential to Sam's authority. Caroline Ellison was romantically involved with Sam and financially dependent on Alameda. Nishad Singh felt loyalty to Sam and feared the personal consequences of whistleblowing. The handful of people who knew about the fraud were trapped in overlapping relationships that made disclosure unthinkable. Several employees noticed suspicious patterns and raised concerns that were suppressed. FTX's compliance department occasionally questioned transactions that looked like fund misappropriation. Sam would personally intervene, explaining the transactions as intercompany loans or operational necessities. Without access to complete accounting records, compliance personnel couldn't verify whether explanations were legitimate or false. Look, the psychological dynamics of fraud are important to understanding how this continued for years. Sam appears to have convinced himself that the borrowing was acceptable through a combination of utilitarian reasoning and risk miscalculation. In his mind, customer funds were generating returns through Alameda's trading and investments. As long as customers could withdraw their funds when requested, the temporary borrowing was harmless. The calculation ignored that temporary had become permanent, and customer withdrawals only worked while confidence remained. This is classic fraud psychology. The perpetrator convinces themselves they're not really stealing, just borrowing. They plan to repay the funds eventually, once the investments pay off or markets recover. Sam genuinely seems to have believed he could grow FTX and Alameda fast enough to cover the missing $8 billion before anyone noticed. The belief required staggering arrogance, but Sam had every reason for arrogance. He'd fooled venture capitalists, regulators, journalists, and millions of customers for 3 years. The hidden crime that made everything else possible was the code Gary Wang wrote giving Alameda special privileges. Without that code, the fraud couldn't have scaled. Alameda would have hit borrowing limits, triggering margin calls and forced liquidations. The automatic risk management would have prevented the $8 billion deficit from accumulating. But Gary's code disabled those protections specifically for Alameda, enabling 3 years of accelerating theft. By mid-2022, covering up the fraud required constant effort. Customer withdrawals had to be processed quickly to maintain confidence, but processing large withdrawals required borrowing even more from the customer fund pool because Alameda couldn't repay what it owed. The accounting team spent increasing time explaining the fund flows to suspicious auditors and compliance personnel. The lies were compounding, requiring new lies to maintain old lies. Sam's response was to double down on public relations. More magazine profiles, more congressional testimony, more effective altruism advocacy. The public persona of Sam Bankman-Fried, responsible crypto leader, was specifically designed to prevent anyone from looking too carefully at FTX's finances. As long as Sam appeared on Bloomberg discussing industry regulation, nobody would suspect he was running one of the largest frauds in history. The hubris reached incredible levels. Sam was simultaneously stealing billions of customer dollars and positioning himself as the ethical adult in crypto. He criticized other exchanges for inadequate fund security, while FTX's security was non-existent. He testified before Congress about protecting consumers, while consumer funds were funding his Bahamas real estate portfolio. The cognitive dissonance either didn't register or he didn't care. By October 2022, Alameda Research owed FTX approximately $8 billion in customer funds. This amount exceeded Alameda's liquid assets by roughly $6 billion, meaning there was no way to repay the deficit without selling illiquid investments at fire sale prices or somehow generating $6 billion in new capital. The fraud had reached a scale where covering it up was becoming nearly impossible. All it would take was one catalyst to collapse the structure, and that catalyst was approaching fast. Chapter 7: House Crumbling. November 2nd, 2022, marked the beginning of the end, though nobody outside FTX's core circle realized it yet. CoinDesk, a cryptocurrency news outlet, published an article examining Alameda Research's balance sheet. The article revealed that Alameda held approximately $14 billion in assets, but that a staggering proportion of those assets, over $5 billion worth, were in FTT, the token created and controlled by FTX. This meant Alameda's financial health depended entirely on FTX's success. creating a circular dependency that looked extremely suspicious. The article was based on leaked financial documents that someone, possibly a disgruntled FTX employee, had provided to CoinDesk reporters. The balance sheet showed FTT holdings at around $3.66 billion, with additional billions in Solana tokens and other FTX-related assets. The concentration was shocking to anyone who understood basic portfolio risk management. Legitimate trading firms diversify assets across uncorrelated instruments. Alameda's balance sheet looked like they'd put all their eggs in one basket, and that basket was owned by their sister company. Caroline Ellison responded to the CoinDesk article on Twitter, trying to calm concerns. She claimed the leaked balance sheet only represented a subset of Alameda's corporate entities, and that Alameda had over $10 billion in assets not reflected in the document. The response was technically true but deliberately misleading. Yes, Alameda had other assets, but those assets were even more illiquid venture investments and locked tokens. The response did nothing to address the fundamental question: why was Alameda so heavily concentrated in FTX-related tokens? Changpeng Zhao, known as CZ, the founder and CEO of Binance, was watching carefully. CZ and Sam had a complicated history. Binance had been an early investor in FTX, purchasing FTX equity in 2019. Sam bought out Binance's stake in 2021 for approximately $2 billion, paid partially in cash and partially in FTT tokens. This meant Binance held around $530 million worth of FTT, making them one of the largest external holders of the token. On November 6, 2022, CZ dropped the bomb that would destroy Sam's empire. He tweeted, "As part of Binance's exit from FTX equity last year, Binance received roughly $2.1 billion USD equivalent in cash, BUSD, and FTT. Due to recent revelations that have come to light, we have decided to liquidate any remaining FTT on our books. We will try to do so in a way that minimizes market impact." The tweet was carefully worded but devastating. CZ was announcing that Binance would sell all their FTT holdings, around $530 million worth, because of recent revelations. The message was clear without being explicit. Binance had lost confidence in FTX. CZ was one of the most influential figures in crypto, and his company was the industry's largest exchange. When CZ signaled concern about a competitor, traders noticed. Sam responded on Twitter with forced confidence. "A competitor is trying to go after us with false rumors. FTX is fine. Assets are fine." He elaborated in a follow-up tweet that FTX had processed billions in withdrawals over the past week without issues, and that the exchange was in strong financial position. The tweets were designed to prevent panic, but they had the opposite effect. Customers started asking, if FTX is fine, why is Sam so defensive? Behind the scenes, FTX was in crisis mode. CZ's announcement triggered a wave of customer withdrawals as traders rushed to get funds off the exchange before potential insolvency. FTX processed around $500 million in withdrawals on November 6th, a manageable amount but alarming in its velocity. November 7th brought over $1 billion in withdrawal requests. November 8th brought more than $4 billion in requests, a number that completely overwhelmed FTX's liquid reserves. You see, the problem was structural. FTX should have held approximately $16 billion in customer funds, with the vast majority sitting in liquid assets or blockchain wallets ready for withdrawal. Instead, FTX held maybe $2 billion in liquid assets because Alameda had borrowed the other $14 billion. The previous years of fraud meant FTX couldn't satisfy withdrawals once the run started. Sam needed to find billions of dollars within days or face complete collapse. Gary Wang and Nishad Singh ran the numbers repeatedly, hoping for different results. Alameda's liquid assets totaled around $2 billion. Selling Alameda's FTT holdings was impossible because dumping billions of dollars of FTT would crash the token's price, destroying the value before they could convert much to cash. The venture investments would take months to liquidate even under normal conditions, and there were no normal conditions anymore. The math was brutal. Alameda owed approximately $8 billion that it could not repay. Caroline Ellison was in a state of near panic. She knew Alameda's position was hopeless and that the fraud was about to be exposed. She reportedly told colleagues that she'd been warning Sam about exactly this scenario for months, but Sam had dismissed her concerns. Now the nightmare scenario was unfolding in real time and there was no escape. Caroline began preparing herself psychologically for the possibility of criminal prosecution. Sam tried desperately to raise emergency funding. He contacted every major investor, pitching them on providing bridge loans to FTX. He emphasized FTX's strong business fundamentals, claiming the liquidity crisis was temporary and caused by CZ's competitive attack. Some investors expressed interest, asking to see current financial statements. When Sam provided those statements, investors immediately backed away. The numbers revealed that FTX didn't have a liquidity crisis. FTX had a solvency crisis. The customer funds were gone. On November 8th, Sam made the desperate decision to reach out to CZ directly. If Binance would acquire FTX, Binance's balance sheet could cover the missing customer funds. CZ would get a competitor eliminated and acquire FTX's technology and customer base. Sam would face humiliation, but avoid criminal prosecution if the acquisition covered customer losses. The conversation happened over private messages and phone calls throughout the day. Think about the desperation required for Sam to propose this. CZ was Sam's chief competitor, someone Sam had criticized publicly for running a less regulated, less sophisticated exchange. Now Sam was begging CZ to buy FTX to prevent complete collapse. CZ recognized the leverage he had and extracted maximum concessions. Sam agreed to essentially give FTX to Binance for free if Binance would assume customer liabilities. On November 9th, CZ tweeted a bombshell. "This afternoon, FTX asked for our help. There is a significant liquidity crunch. To protect users, we signed a non-binding LOI, intending to fully acquire FTX and help cover the liquidity crunch." The crypto world reacted with shock. FTX, the exchange valued at $32 billion just 9 months earlier, was being acquired by its competitor for essentially nothing in an emergency bailout. For approximately 24 hours, it looked like customers might be saved. Binance's resources could cover the deficit. FTX customers would have their funds, though they'd now be Binance customers. Sam's reputation would be destroyed, but he'd avoid prison. The catastrophe seemed manageable. But then Binance's due diligence team started examining FTX's books. What they found was much worse than expected. The deficit wasn't just a few $billions. Customer funds totaling approximately $8 billion had disappeared into Alameda Research. Alameda had spent those funds on illiquid investments, real estate, political donations, and trading losses. Recovering the funds would require liquidating assets that didn't have buyers at any reasonable price. Worse, the accounting was so convoluted that determining exact fund flows was nearly impossible. Binance's legal team raised another concern. Acquiring FTX could expose Binance to regulatory liability. US prosecutors were likely to investigate what happened to customer funds. If Binance acquired FTX, Binance might become entangled in criminal investigations and civil lawsuits. The risk wasn't worth it, regardless of FTX's customer base or technology. On November 9th, less than 24 hours after announcing the acquisition, CZ tweeted, "As a result of corporate due diligence, as well as the latest news reports regarding mishandled customer funds and alleged US agency investigations, we have decided that we will not pursue the potential acquisition of FTX." That tweet sealed FTX's fate. Within hours, more details leaked about the missing customer funds. Bloomberg reported that Alameda Research had borrowed approximately $10 billion from FTX customer deposits. Reuters reported that FTX had moved customer funds to Alameda. John Ray III, a restructuring expert who'd overseen Enron's bankruptcy, was being approached about taking over FTX's administration. Sam's Twitter account went quiet. The confident proclamations that FTX is fine had stopped. Inside the Bahamas penthouse, the core team was facing reality. They'd stolen billions of dollars of customer money. The theft was about to become public. Criminal prosecutors would certainly investigate. Lives were about to be destroyed. November 10th, 2022, FTX suspended customer withdrawals entirely. The exchange announced it needed time to process the backlog, but everyone understood what this meant. FTX didn't have customer funds available for withdrawal. The admission triggered panic across the crypto industry. Exchanges everywhere saw withdrawal surges as customers worried about contagion. Bitcoin's price dropped below $16,000 as confidence in crypto infrastructure collapsed. Sam's net worth, estimated at $24 billion at the start of November, was now effectively zero. His FTX equity was worthless. His personal holdings were mostly illiquid assets bought with money that needed to be returned to customers. Everything he'd built over 5 years had evaporated in 8 days. The house was not just crumbling, it had collapsed into rubble. Chapter 8, Total Collapse, November 11, 2022, marked Sam Bankman-Fried's absolute surrender. At 4:30 a.m. Bahamas time, he tweeted, "I'm sorry, that's the biggest thing. I fucked up and should have done better." The tweet was simultaneously an admission and an abdication, confirming that something had gone catastrophically wrong while providing no specific details about what that something was. For someone who'd spent years managing his public image meticulously, the incoherent apology revealed complete loss of control. Throughout November 11th, more devastating details emerged. The Wall Street Journal reported that FTX had lent more than $4 billion to Alameda Research. Reuters reported the total was closer to $10 billion. BlockFi, the crypto lender that FTX had acquired months earlier, announced it was pausing withdrawals because its assets were trapped on FTX. The contagion was spreading to every entity that had trusted FTX with funds or custody. John Ray III, the restructuring specialist who'd overseen Enron's bankruptcy, agreed to take over FTX as CEO. Ray was legendary in bankruptcy circles for managing complex corporate collapses, including Enron, one of the largest bankruptcies in American history. His appointment signaled that FTX was heading for formal bankruptcy proceedings. Sam would be forced out, and professionals would take control. On November 11th, FTX, Alameda Research, and approximately 130 affiliated entities filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in Delaware. The filing listed more than 1 million creditors, meaning more than 1 million individuals and institutions had funds trapped in the collapsed exchange. The bankruptcy petition estimated assets and liabilities both in the range of $10 to $50 billion, a stunning admission that FTX had no clear understanding of its own financial position. Sam resigned as CEO simultaneously with the bankruptcy filing, replaced by John Ray III. In his resignation statement, Sam wrote, "I'm really sorry again that we ended up here. Hopefully things can find a way to recover." The passive language, "things can find a way to recover," avoided taking responsibility for the specific actions that caused the collapse. Sam was positioning himself as a victim of circumstances rather than the architect of fraud. John Ray's first days examining FTX's records shocked him despite decades of experience with corporate malfeasance. On November 17th, Ray filed a declaration with the bankruptcy court describing what he'd found. The document, written in careful legal language, contained some of the most damning statements about corporate governance ever filed in a bankruptcy proceeding. "Never in my career have I seen such a complete failure of corporate controls and such a complete absence of trustworthy financial information as occurred here." Ray detailed specific failures systematically. FTX had no accounting department or accurate financial statements. Expenses were approved through casual group chats, with employees submitting requests using emojis. Alameda's balance sheet was modified regularly to hide losses and inflate assets. The company maintained no list of bank accounts or a comprehensive ledger of assets. Billions of dollars moved between entities without documentation or apparent business purpose. Customer funds were mixed with company funds without segregation or tracking. The declaration revealed specific absurdities. FTX maintained no security controls over access to customer funds. Private keys for cryptocurrency wallets were stored in plain text on unsecured servers. Employees used FTX funds to purchase homes in their own names in the Bahamas, with the company providing individual mortgage payments. Company funds paid for personal deliveries, including food and other items, for employees and their family members. The corporate governance wasn't just bad, it was essentially non-existent. Behind the scenes, criminal investigations were accelerating. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, which handles major financial crimes, opened an investigation on November 10th. The Securities and Exchange Commission and Commodity Futures Trading Commission launched parallel investigations. Bahamian authorities, embarrassed by the fraud occurring in their jurisdiction, began their own investigation. By November 15th, at least 8 separate agencies were investigating FTX's collapse. Sam remained in the Bahamas penthouse, now isolated as former colleagues distanced themselves. Caroline Ellison had stopped communicating with him, retaining separate legal counsel. Gary Wang and Nishad Singh were similarly avoiding contact, following their lawyers' advice. The group that had lived and worked together was fracturing as each individual faced separate criminal exposure and sought to minimize personal liability. The scale of customer losses was becoming clear. FTX held approximately $16 billion in customer deposits at peak, but the bankruptcy estate could locate only about $1 billion in liquid assets. The remaining $15 billion had been spent on Alameda's trading losses, illiquid investments, real estate, political donations, and other expenditures. Even if bankruptcy administrators recovered every penny from selling FTX's assets, customers would receive perhaps 10 or 20 cents per dollar owed. Most customers would lose the majority of their funds permanently. What's interesting is how Sam responded to the collapse psychologically. Instead of going silent, he began giving interviews and writing Twitter threads attempting to explain what happened. The explanations were rambling, contradictory, and strategically baffling from a legal perspective. Any competent defense attorney would have ordered immediate silence, but Sam apparently believed he could talk his way out of criminal liability. In a Twitter thread on November 14th, Sam claimed FTX US, the American entity, was fully solvent with hundreds of millions in surplus assets, but that he'd made an accounting error regarding the international FTX entity. He suggested the collapse was caused by a poor internal labeling of customer funds and misunderstanding between FTX and Alameda about borrowing. The explanation made no sense. You don't accidentally lend $8 billion to your sister company through poor internal labeling. Sam gave interviews to multiple reporters, including at Vox and the New York Times, attempting to control the narrative. In messages to Vox reporter Kelsey Piper, Sam admitted that effective altruism had been mostly a front and that the ethics was dumb shit, he said to appeal to specific audiences. The messages, published by Vox, destroyed whatever remained of Sam's ethical reputation. He'd built his brand on effective altruism and responsible business practices, and now he was admitting it was calculated deception. The most legally damaging interview was with the New York Times. Andrew Ross Sorkin interviewed Sam at the DealBook Summit on November 30th, with Sam appearing remotely from the Bahamas. Sam claimed he didn't knowingly commingle customer funds, that he wasn't aware of the scale of Alameda's borrowing, and that the collapse was caused by a liquidity crisis he failed to manage. These statements contradicted extensive evidence showing Sam had directed the fund misappropriation since 2019. Criminal defense attorneys watching these interviews reacted with horror. Sam was making statements that could be used against him in trial, admitting facts that would require explanation and contradicting defenses he might later want to raise. The interviews demonstrated either staggering arrogance or complete inability to accept reality. Sam apparently believed he could charm and talk his way through a criminal investigation the same way he'd charmed venture capitalists and journalists. By late November, FTX customers were organizing. Class action lawsuits were filed against Sam, FTX executives, and celebrity endorsers who'd promoted the exchange. Tom Brady, Gisele Bündchen, Steph Curry, and other celebrities faced lawsuits alleging they'd been paid to endorse FTX without disclosing it was a risky, unregulated exchange. The celebrity endorsers would eventually settle, paying back their endorsement fees plus damages. The political donations became incredibly awkward for recipients. Candidates Sam had funded faced pressure to return the money, but most donations had already been spent on campaign activities. Republican and Democratic Party committees began internal investigations trying to determine which donations came from legitimate company funds versus customer money. The political fallout would haunt Sam's recipients through subsequent election cycles. FTX's bankruptcy administrators discovered that Sam had transferred over $300 million to himself and other insiders during the days before bankruptcy filing. These transfers, occurring while FTX was insolvent and unable to process customer withdrawals, were potentially fraudulent conveyances that could be clawed back. Sam had taken money for himself while customers were losing everything. Bahamian authorities began preparing to arrest Sam based on expected U.S. criminal charges. On December 9, 2022, Sam was notified that he would be arrested the following day and extradited to the United States to face charges. That evening, Sam scrambled to contact lawyers, family, and remaining associates. His parents flew to the Bahamas to support him. The reality of criminal prosecution was no longer theoretical. December 12, 2022, at approximately 6 p.m. Bahamas time, Royal Bahamas Police Force officers arrived at Sam's Albany Marina penthouse. Sam was arrested and taken to Fox Hill Prison, a notorious facility known for overcrowding and poor conditions. The former billionaire who'd lived in luxury penthouses spent the night in a Bahamian prison cell, sharing space with local criminals. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York announced charges the next morning: wire fraud, securities fraud, commodities fraud, money laundering, campaign finance violations, and conspiracy. The indictment alleged Sam had defrauded FTX customers, Alameda investors, and FTX equity investors through a scheme spanning 2019 to 2022. If convicted on all counts, Sam faced over 100 years in prison. Sam initially contested extradition, but his lawyers quickly realized fighting was futile. The Bahamas had an extradition treaty with the United States, and the evidence supported the charges. On December 21, 2022, Sam waived extradition rights and was flown to New York under FBI custody. He appeared in Manhattan federal court that evening, pleading not guilty to all charges. The judge set bail at $250 million, secured by his parents' California home, and Sam was placed under house arrest at his parents' Palo Alto residence. The collapse from $32 billion net worth to arrested and charged occurred in exactly 40 days. November 2nd, the CoinDesk article questioning Alameda's balance sheet, to December 12th, arrest in the Bahamas. 40 days. The speed of collapse exceeded even spectacular historical bankruptcies like Lehman Brothers. Sam had been appearing on magazine covers in October. By mid-December, he was in handcuffs. Total collapse was complete. FTX was bankrupt with over 1 million creditors. Alameda Research was being liquidated. Customer funds totaling over $8 billion were missing. Criminal charges had been filed. Co-conspirators were cooperating with prosecutors. The empire was destroyed, and the architect faced spending the rest of his life in prison. Everything Sam had built, stolen, and spent was gone. Chapter 9: Trial Reckoning. The criminal trial of Sam Bankman-Fried began on October 3, 2023, in Manhattan Federal Court, presiding Judge Lewis Kaplan overseeing what would become one of the most significant white-collar criminal trials in decades. The charges against Sam had expanded through superseding indictments to include 8 counts total: 2 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit commodities fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to commit securities fraud, and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit money laundering. The prosecution team, led by Assistant U.S. Attorneys Nicholas Roos, Danielle Sassoon, and Thane Wren, had spent months building an overwhelming case. They had financial records seized from FTX and Alameda. They had internal communications, including signal messages, Slack conversations, and emails. Most devastatingly, they had cooperating witnesses. Caroline Ellison, Gary Wang, and Nishad Singh had all pleaded guilty to fraud charges and agreed to testify against Sam in exchange for potentially reduced sentences. Sam's defense team, led by attorney Mark Cohen, faced an almost impossible task. The evidence of fraud was extensive and well documented. The cooperating witnesses would provide insider testimony about Sam's specific instructions to misuse customer funds. Sam himself had given numerous interviews, admitting facts that supported the charges. Building a credible defense required explaining how $8 billion of customer funds disappeared without Sam's knowledge or intent, a nearly impossible narrative. Opening statements revealed the prosecution and defense strategies. Prosecutor Thane Wren told jurors, "The defendant victimized thousands of people and stole billions of dollars. Those billions of dollars were spent on things the defendant wanted: investments, political contributions, real estate. He spent his customers' money, and when his customers wanted it back, he lied to them." The theory was straightforward. Sam stole customer funds and lied to cover it up. Mark Cohen's opening statement argued Sam was an entrepreneur who made mistakes, but never intended to defraud anyone. Cohen claimed Sam believed Alameda's borrowing was legitimate, that the borrowed funds were covered by Alameda's assets, and that the collapse was caused by market crash and bank run rather than fraud. The defense strategy was to portray Sam as overwhelmed and negligent rather than criminal, arguing the prosecution was criminalizing business failure. The prosecution's case unfolded over 2 weeks, methodically establishing the fraud through documents and witness testimony. FBI agents testified about seizing FTX's financial records and tracing customer fund flows. Blockchain analysts demonstrated how customer deposits moved from FTX to Alameda and then to various purchases. The paper trail was devastating, showing billions flowing from customer wallets to real estate, venture investments, and Sam's personal accounts. Customer witnesses testified about their losses. Some had invested life savings in FTX, believing Sam's promises that funds were safe. Institutional investors described sophisticated due diligence processes that had failed to uncover the fraud because Sam had provided false financial statements. The human impact testimony established that real people had been devastated by Sam's actions, countering any defense suggestion that the fraud was victimless. Then came the cooperating witnesses, starting with Gary Wang. Gary testified over 2 days, describing how he'd programmed special privileges for Alameda at Sam's specific direction. He walked through the code line by line, showing where Alameda's account was exempted from liquidation triggers and margin requirements. He testified that Sam told him explicitly to create these exemptions, knowing they would allow Alameda to borrow customer funds. Gary's testimony was technical but devastating, proving the fraud was coded into FTX's systems from the beginning. Nishad Singh followed, testifying about his role as FTX's director of engineering. Nishad described discovering the full extent of the fraud in mid-2022 and confronting Sam about the missing customer funds. He testified that Sam had acknowledged the deficit, but claimed he could fix it through business growth and investment returns. Nishad's testimony established that Sam knew about the fraud, knew the amounts involved, and chose to continue rather than disclose the truth. Caroline Ellison's testimony was the most dramatic and damaging. Over 3 days on the witness stand, Caroline methodically destroyed every element of Sam's defense. She testified that Sam had explicitly directed her to use FTX customer funds for Alameda's trading and investments. She described multiple meetings where Sam discussed the missing funds and strategies to conceal the deficit from customers, investors, and regulators. She testified about the false balance sheets Sam instructed her to create, hiding Alameda's FTX borrowing from lenders and investors. Caroline testified about her romantic relationship with Sam, including how Sam had used their relationship to pressure her into continuing to run Alameda despite her concerns about the fraud. She described feeling trapped and terrified, but unable to stop because Sam was both her boss and boyfriend. Her testimony painted Sam as manipulative, using personal relationships to ensure loyalty and silence from subordinates who knew about the crimes. The prosecution introduced Caroline's private journals and Google documents, where she'd written about her anxiety regarding Alameda's financial position. Entries from 2022 described her fear that Alameda couldn't repay its FTX debts and that the fraud would eventually be exposed. The contemporaneous documentary evidence supported her testimony, proving these weren't reconstructed memories, but real-time concerns she documented as events unfolded. You see, the prosecution's case was airtight because they had everything. Documents showing fund flows, code showing preferential treatment, internal communications showing knowledge, and insider witnesses explaining Sam's specific instructions. The defense tried to suggest that cooperating witnesses were lying to reduce their own sentences, But the documentary evidence corroborated every material claim they made. Sam couldn't credibly deny what the documents clearly showed. The defense case lasted only 3 days, calling just 3 witnesses, including Sam himself. Calling Sam to testify was a desperate tactical decision, necessary because the defense had no other way to present their narrative. But putting a defendant on the stand is risky because the prosecution gets to cross-examine. And Sam had already proven himself to be an unreliable witness during his pre-trial interviews. Sam testified over parts of 3 days, attempting to explain how the fraud occurred without his knowledge or intent. He claimed he delegated financial management to Caroline and other executives and didn't closely monitor fund flows between FTX and Alameda. He testified he believed Alameda's borrowing was legitimate and covered by Alameda's assets. He suggested the collapse was caused by market conditions and bank runs rather than misappropriation of funds. The testimony was rambling, evasive, and frequently contradicted by documents the prosecution immediately showed him. Prosecutor Danielle Sassoon conducted a devastating cross-examination. She showed Sam internal messages where he discussed specific fund transfers between FTX and Alameda. She showed him balance sheets he'd personally reviewed, showing Alameda's massive FTX borrowing. She showed him presentations he'd given to investors that included false statements about FTX's fund segregation. Every explanation Sam offered was immediately contradicted by documents bearing his name or messages he'd personally sent. The most damaging exchange came when Sassoon asked Sam about statements he'd made to investors and customers, assuring them that FTX didn't invest or lend customer funds. Sam tried to pass language, suggesting he'd meant FTX, the entity, didn't lend funds, but Alameda could borrow them. Sassoon methodically showed this distinction was meaningless. Customer funds deposited to FTX ended up with Alameda, regardless of technical corporate structures. Sam's credibility evaporated as he tried to maintain increasingly absurd distinctions. Sam's testimony lasted approximately 16 hours total, across 3 days. By the end, even defense attorneys in the gallery were cringing at his performance. He'd been evasive when direct answers would have helped, verbose when brevity was needed, and contradictory in ways that made him look dishonest rather than confused. The decision to put Sam on the stand had backfired completely. Closing arguments occurred on November 1, 2023. The prosecution used simple, powerful language summarizing the evidence. Sam stole billions of customer dollars, lied about it repeatedly, and spent the money on personal luxuries and investments. The defense argument, equally simple but far less supported by evidence, claimed Sam made business mistakes but never intended to defraud anyone. The jury received the case that afternoon. Deliberations lasted just over 4 hours, remarkably fast for such a complex fraud case. The quick verdict suggested the jury found the evidence overwhelming and the defense unpersuasive. On November 2, 2023, at approximately 7:30 p.m., the jury returned verdicts, guilty on all 8 counts. Sam showed no visible reaction as the verdicts were read, staring at the defense table while his parents wept in the gallery. Judge Kaplan ordered Sam remanded to custody immediately, revoking the bail that had allowed Sam to remain under house arrest during trial. Federal marshals handcuffed Sam and led him out of the courtroom to Metropolitan Detention Center, Brooklyn, where he would await sentencing. The detention was appropriate given the guilty verdicts and Sam's access to funds that might allow him to flee. The guilty verdicts vindicated the prosecutor's 18-month investigation and the cooperating witnesses who'd risked their own futures by testifying. For FTX customers watching the trial, the verdicts provided some measure of justice, though they couldn't recover the billions they'd lost. For Sam, the verdicts meant he'd almost certainly spend decades in federal prison, likely the rest of his productive life. Legal experts analyzing the trial emphasized how completely the prosecution had dominated. The documentary evidence was overwhelming, the witness testimony credible and corroborated, and Sam's own testimony disastrous for the defense. Some defense attorneys criticized Mark Cohen's decision to call Sam as a witness, arguing the defense would have been better presenting no case, and arguing the prosecution failed to prove intent beyond reasonable doubt. The trial revealed details about FTX's operations that shocked even experienced financial observers. The complete absence of accounting controls, the casual approval of billion-dollar transactions through emoji-laden chats, the mixing of customer and company funds without segregation. The corporate governance was worse than anyone had imagined. John Ray's bankruptcy declaration had described it as the worst in his career, and the trial testimony supported that assessment. Sam's conviction on all 8 counts carried a maximum sentence of 110 years in prison, though federal sentencing guidelines would likely recommend something lower. Sentencing was scheduled for March 2024, giving Judge Kaplan several months to review presentence reports and consider appropriate punishment. Sam faced the prospect of spending the rest of his life in federal prison for the fraud he'd committed. Chapter 10. Behind Bars. March 28, 2024, marked the final legal reckoning for Sam Bankman-Fried. Judge Lewis Kaplan's courtroom in Lower Manhattan was packed with journalists, FTX victims, and legal observers awaiting the sentencing hearing. Sam, wearing prison khakis after 5 months in Metropolitan Detention Center, Brooklyn, looked gaunt and noticeably different from the billionaire who'd appeared on magazine covers just 18 months earlier. His characteristic curly hair had been cut short, and the confident affect had been replaced by visible anxiety. The presentence report prepared by the probation office recommended a sentence of 100 years in prison based on the fraud's scale and Sam's lack of remorse. The prosecution filed a sentencing memorandum requesting 40 to 50 years, arguing this would reflect the unprecedented nature of the fraud, the massive harm to victims, and Sam's perjury during trial testimony. The defense requested a sentence of 5 to 6.5 years, arguing Sam had no prior criminal history, that significant funds might be recovered through bankruptcy proceedings, and that Sam had cooperated with the investigation. The hearing began with victim impact statements. FTX customers who'd lost life savings described the fraud's devastating impact. One victim testified about losing $2 million in retirement savings that he'd deposited to FTX based on Sam's promises of safety. Another described how the fraud had destroyed her small business because operating capital had been held on the exchange. A third victim, visibly emotional, explained how Sam's effective altruism branding had specifically convinced him to trust FTX with funds he'd been saving for his daughter's medical treatment. The victim testimony was powerful and personal, putting human faces on the abstract financial losses. FTX's bankruptcy had affected over 1 million customers, but the handful who testified represented the broader devastation. Judge Kaplan listened carefully, occasionally asking questions about the specific representations that had convinced victims to trust FTX with funds. Prosecutor Nicholas Roos argued for a lengthy sentence, emphasizing multiple aggravating factors. First, the fraud scale was extraordinary. Over $8 billion stolen from customers, making it one of the largest financial frauds in American history. Second, Sam had abused positions of trust as both FTX's CEO and as a public advocate for regulatory reform. Third, Sam had committed perjury during his trial testimony, lying under oath about his knowledge and intent. Fourth, Sam had shown no genuine remorse, continuing to minimize his conduct even after conviction. Roos specifically addressed Sam's arguments about potential recovery of funds through bankruptcy. While bankruptcy administrators had indeed recovered several $1 billion through asset sales, the recovery resulted from their efforts, not Sam's cooperation. Moreover, the recovered amounts would leave customers with significant losses. Using potential partial recovery to reduce sentencing would create terrible precedent, essentially giving fraudsters credit for not spending literally every dollar they stole. Defense attorney Mark Cohen presented Sam's mitigation case, emphasizing that Sam had no prior criminal history and had intended to earn money for charitable giving rather than personal enrichment. Cohen argued Sam's utilitarian philosophy, while misguided, showed he wasn't motivated by greed like typical fraudsters. Cohen pointed to testimony that Sam lived modestly despite access to billions, driving a basic car and sleeping on a beanbag rather than enjoying luxury lifestyle. Cohen's argument was undercut by extensive evidence of extravagant spending. The prosecution reminded Judge Kaplan that Sam had purchased $200 million in Bahamas real estate, spent hundreds of millions on political donations and celebrity endorsements, and made billion-dollar venture investments. The modest lifestyle claims were selective presentation, ignoring the massive spending on properties, parties, and influence. Judge Kaplan appeared skeptical of the defense characterization. Sam was given an opportunity to address the court, a standard part of federal sentencing. His statement lasted approximately 15 minutes and demonstrated the same evasiveness that had characterized his trial testimony. Sam apologized for disappointing customers, investors, and employees, but continued to frame the collapse as business failure rather than criminal fraud. He suggested that if he'd managed FTX better, the exchange would have survived and customers would have recovered their funds. Judge Kaplan interrupted Sam multiple times during the statement, pressing him on specific issues. When Sam claimed he didn't know about the fund misappropriation until 2022, Judge Kaplan noted this contradicted overwhelming trial evidence, showing Sam had directed the fraud since 2019. When Sam suggested bankruptcy recoveries would make customers whole, Judge Kaplan corrected him, noting that recoveries would still leave billions in losses. The interruptions made clear Judge Kaplan wasn't accepting Sam's narrative. After Sam's statement, Judge Kaplan delivered his sentencing decision, with remarks explaining his reasoning. Kaplan began by noting the fraud's extraordinary scale, affecting over 1 million victims and causing billions in losses. He emphasized that Sam had built FTX's reputation through deliberate misrepresentations about fund safety, using effective altruism branding to attract customers who specifically cared about ethical business practices. Judge Kaplan addressed Sam's trial testimony specifically, stating clearly that Sam had committed perjury on the witness stand. Kaplan noted that Sam's testimony had been evasive, contradictory, and directly refuted by documentary evidence. The perjury was an aggravating factor, demonstrating Sam's willingness to lie even under oath when facing criminal consequences. Kaplan suggested the perjury showed Sam remained fundamentally dishonest about his conduct. The judge then discussed the appropriate sentence, systematically rejecting the defense's arguments for leniency. The lack of criminal history, while noted, was outweighed by the fraud's scale and Sam's sophisticated planning. The effective altruism motivation, rather than mitigating the offense, made it worse by helping Sam attract victims who trusted his ethical branding. The potential for bankruptcy recoveries was irrelevant to determining punishment for the underlying crimes. Judge Kaplan announced the sentence, 25 years in federal prison. The sentence reflected the fraud's magnitude while accounting for Sam's age. He was 32 at sentencing and providing some possibility of eventual release. A 40 or 50-year sentence would have been effectively life imprisonment given Sam's age. The 25-year sentence meant Sam would likely serve approximately 21 years after good time credit, being released in his early 50s if he survived incarceration. Additionally, Judge Kaplan ordered Sam to forfeit $11 billion, representing the total amount of customer losses. The forfeiture was largely symbolic, since Sam no longer possessed billions to forfeit, but it established the government's claim against any assets Sam might have hidden or might acquire in the future. The order also allowed the government to assist bankruptcy administrators in recovering funds for victims. Sam's parents reacted with visible distress to the sentence. Barbara Fried and Joseph Bankman had attended every day of trial and sentencing, watching their son be convicted and sentenced to decades in prison. Their legal expertise made them understand that Sam would likely serve at least 2 decades before potential release. The family that had seemed destined for academic and philanthropic success had been destroyed by Sam's fraud. Sam was remanded to continue custody at Metropolitan Detention Center, Brooklyn, pending transfer to a federal prison. The Bureau of Prisons would determine the specific facility, likely a medium security institution somewhere in the federal system. Sam would spend years navigating prison politics, far removed from the Bahamas penthouses and magazine covers that had defined his brief reign as crypto's golden boy. The cooperating witnesses, Caroline Ellison, Gary Wang, and Nishad Singh, awaited their own sentencing hearings, scheduled for later in 2024. Their sentences would likely be significantly lower than Sam's given their cooperation, guilty pleas, and testimony. Caroline might receive 2 to 5 years. Gary and Nishad might receive even less given their less central roles. The cooperation had been crucial to securing Sam's conviction, and the government would recommend leniency accordingly. FTX's bankruptcy proceedings continued separately from the criminal case. John Ray III and his team had recovered approximately $7 billion through asset sales, liquidation of investments, and recovery of political donations and real estate. The recovered funds would be distributed to customers through the bankruptcy process, likely returning 60 to 70 cents per dollar owed. While significant, the recovery meant billions in permanent losses. The 25-year sentence sent a strong message to the cryptocurrency industry. Federal prosecutors had pursued FTX aggressively, demonstrating that crypto firms couldn't escape prosecution by operating offshore or using technical complexity to conceal fraud. The sentence was among the harshest ever imposed for financial fraud, comparable to Bernie Madoff's 150-year sentence for his Ponzi scheme that caused similar losses. Legal observers debated whether 25 years was appropriate. Some argued the sentence was too harsh, given Sam's age and lack of violent criminal history, suggesting 10 to 15 years would have been sufficient. Others argued 25 years was too lenient given the fraud scale, comparing it unfavorably to sentences for drug offenses or other crimes that typically receive longer punishments despite causing less economic harm. Think about what Sam's life would be for the next 2 decades. Federal prison routine, limited contact with family, no access to technology or markets, surrounded by other criminals. The mathematical prodigy who'd built a billion-dollar empire in 5 years would spend his 30s and 40s in incarceration. If he survived and was eventually released in his early 50s, he'd emerge into a world that had moved on, his reputation permanently destroyed, facing likely civil lawsuits and financial devastation. The effective altruism community grappled with Sam's collapse and what it revealed about the movement. Sam had been effective altruism's highest-profile advocate, living proof that earning to give could generate massive charitable impact. His fraud and the revelation that his ethical commitments were mostly a front damaged the movement's credibility. Effective altruism organizations scrambled to return donations that had come from FTX, trying to distance themselves from the tainted money. Behind bars, Sam would have years to contemplate the decisions that led to his destruction. The choice to program Alameda's special privileges into FTX's code in 2019, the decision to spend billions on political donations and real estate rather than maintaining customer fund segregation, the calculation that he could maintain the fraud indefinitely through public relations and financial engineering. Each decision had seemed rational at the time, at least through Sam's utilitarian calculus. Collectively, they'd led to catastrophe. Sam Bankman-Fried's story had ended not with philanthropy and innovation, but with federal prison and permanent infamy. The boy genius who'd been compared to Warren Buffett would instead be remembered alongside Bernie Madoff, Alan Stanford, and other infamous fraudsters. The Bahamas empire had collapsed completely, leaving only ruins and a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition, regulatory arbitrage, and moral flexibility disguised as utilitarian calculation. When you step back and look at the full picture of Sam Bankman-Fried's rise and fall, what emerges is a case study in modern financial fraud enabled by technological complexity, regulatory gaps, and effective personal branding. Sam didn't invent a new type of fraud. Misappropriating customer funds is among the oldest financial crimes. What made his fraud unprecedented was the scale, speed, and sophistication of the deception combined with crypto's unique regulatory environment. The rise took 5 years, from founding Alameda Research in October 2017 to reaching a $32 billion valuation in January 2022. The fall took 10 days, from the CoinDesk article on November 2, 2022, to the bankruptcy filing on November 11th. The disparity between rise and fall reflects how fragile the empire was, built entirely on customer funds that couldn't withstand a withdrawal run once confidence collapsed. Today, approximately 2 years after FTX's collapse, the cryptocurrency industry continues processing the implications. Regulatory agencies worldwide have tightened oversight of crypto exchanges, requiring better fund segregation and proof of reserves. Major exchanges now undergo regular audits and publish attestations about customer fund custody. The regulatory response came too late for FTX customers, but may prevent future frauds of similar scale. The bankruptcy estate has recovered approximately $7 billion through extraordinary efforts by John Ray III's team. Asset sales, venture investment liquidations, and clawbacks from political donations and real estate purchases generated funds that will partially compensate customers. The recovery rate of approximately 60 to 70 cents per dollar represents success given how thoroughly Sam had spent customer money, but it still means billions in permanent losses. Several downstream effects rippled through the industry. BlockFi, the crypto lender FTX had acquired, collapsed completely. Genesis Global, a major crypto lender that had exposure to FTX, filed for bankruptcy. Cryptocurrency prices declined sharply as confidence in exchange infrastructure evaporated. Bitcoin fell to $16,000, its lowest level since 2020. The contagion took months to fully resolve as interconnected firms unwound their FTX exposure. The political ramifications continue affecting Washington. Congressional committees investigated how FTX's fraud went undetected despite Sam's extensive engagement with regulators. The investigations revealed that Sam's political donations had indeed purchased access and influence, though whether they directly prevented regulatory action remains debated. Candidates who'd received FTX-linked donations faced awkward questions about why they'd accepted money from a fraudster, though most maintained they'd been fooled like everyone else. Effective altruism as a philosophical movement suffered reputational damage that persists. Sam had been the movement's most prominent public advocate, embodying the earning-to-give approach that many effective altruists promoted. His admission that the ethics was dumb shit, he said for branding purposes, devastated the community. Organizations that received FTX Foundation grants returned the money where possible and conducted internal reviews about donor vetting. The movement's association with Sam will take years to overcome. The real lesson here isn't about cryptocurrency specifically. Similar frauds have occurred in traditional finance with depressing regularity. Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme, Alan Stanford's certificate of deposit fraud, Enron's accounting manipulations. The common thread is that sophisticated financial fraud exploits gaps between appearance and reality, using complexity and trusted reputations to delay detection until the scale becomes catastrophic. What made Sam's fraud distinctively modern was the technology and branding he used. The cryptocurrency infrastructure allowed moving billions internationally with minimal friction, evading banking oversight that might have detected the fund transfers. The effective altruism branding attracted customers who specifically valued ethics, making them ironically more vulnerable to someone pretending to share those values. The Silicon Valley venture capital environment provided billions in funding based on growth metrics rather than audited financials. The human elements were universal across financial frauds. Sam's apparent belief that he could manage the fraud indefinitely, maintaining confidence through public relations until investments paid off, and he could replace stolen funds. The subordinates who knew about the fraud but felt trapped by personal relationships, financial dependence, and fear of consequences. The sophisticated investors who conducted due diligence but accepted explanations that seemed plausible from a trusted source. Sam's 25-year sentence reflects society's judgment that financial fraud on this scale deserves severe punishment. Whether 25 years is too harsh or too lenient depends partly on one's views about criminal justice and partly on how you weigh the fraud's impact. The $8 billion in customer losses destroyed life savings, retirement accounts, and business capital for over 1 million people. Some victims lost everything. That harm justifies serious punishment, even if Sam never physically harmed anyone. The question remains whether FTX's collapse and Sam's conviction will prevent future frauds. Regulatory responses have improved exchange oversight, but determined fraudsters adapt to new regulations. The fundamental challenge is that financial institutions require trust. Customers must believe their deposits are safe, and trust can be manipulated by sophisticated operators. No regulatory framework can completely eliminate fraud without making legitimate business impossible. So the question remains, what responsibility do we collectively bear for enabling Sam's fraud? venture capitalists invested billions based on growth numbers without verifying basic financial controls. Regulators accepted assurances about fund segregation without auditing. Journalists wrote glowing profiles accepting Sam's narrative uncritically. Celebrities endorsed FTX for millions without questioning whether customer funds were actually protected. Everyone involved failed to exercise appropriate skepticism. Whether we like it or not, Sam Bankman-Fried's story has become a defining cautionary tale about the dangers of unregulated financial innovation combined with effective personal branding. The mathematical prodigy, who built a $32 billion crypto empire in 5 years, will spend decades in federal prison for the fraud that funded that empire. The effective altruist, who claimed to be earning money specifically to donate, it was actually stealing money to fund personal luxuries and political influence. The responsible industry leader who testified before Congress about protecting consumers was simultaneously running one of the largest financial frauds in history. The $32 billion that existed in January 2022 vanished completely by November 2022, revealed as accounting fiction rather than real wealth. Sam's personal net worth went from $24 billion to zero in 10 days. The empire built on stolen customer funds collapsed the moment customers wanted their money back, exposing the fraud that had operated for 3 years. Everything Sam touched during those 5 years, the businesses, investments, properties, donations, was tainted by the underlying theft. Behind bars for the next 2 decades, Sam will have ample time to contemplate the decisions that led from MIT math prodigy to convicted fraudster. The choice to program special privileges for Alameda into FTX's systems. The decision to spend billions on political donations and real estate rather than maintaining proper fund segregation. The calculation that he could maintain appearances indefinitely through clever public relations. Each choice seemed rational within Sam's utilitarian framework, at least when the framework conveniently ignored that the funds came from theft.